Hi, this is Chris Levette for CSRM. I am a current board member and former athlete. I'm here with Jonathan Detweiler of Uttermost Sports, again in our Sports Ministry Training Outreach Series.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. Thanks for tracking with us. We've made a lot of progress. We hope you're following along. And it's really great to have you with us, Chris. I'm excited that you're here.
I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the invitation as a former athlete, if you can call me that, I guess.
Yeah, I think you are. And you played at the collegiate level, basketball.
I did, yeah.
And you also came through the sports ministry programs of a local church.
I did. I grew up in the sports ministry program that Greg led about 10, 15 years ago.
Wow, that's great. Well, I think the topic we're continuing on with is really appropriate, and I think your input will be invaluable for us. So,
yeah.
Shall we get started?
Yeah, we can just jump right in.
Okay, so let me remind you that we are in the 7th topic of our training series, and this 7th topic is integrating faith and sport. And Greg has done a great job of giving us a biblical perspective on competition. We've discussed also what sports are biblically defensible and what makes a sport biblically defensible and what doesn't.
Right.
And so our 6th session here today is what we're entitling Competition, Athletes, and the Bible. And as we begin, this is our contact information. Chris, what is your involvement with CSRM again? Maybe you can introduce yourself.
I currently am the vice president of the board of directors. I've served on the board for about 4 years now and served as vice president for 2. I also am kind of the, I don't know what you would call me, volunteer financial director, I guess, as well.
You do a little bit of everything, it sounds like, I think.
Yeah, because my main job is I am a tax accountant. So,
okay, great.
Yeah.
That's cool. And my name is Jonathan Detweiler, and I'm with Uttermost Sports, and we are one of about 10 ministry partners with CSRM, and we've come together to do this training. And I have had experience in sports ministry in more than 70 countries. I've had the chance to go in and utilize the tool of sport ministry. And so, Chris and I both see sports as one of the greatest tools that God has given us to reach this generation with the gospel.
Yeah.
And so today's topic that we're discussing, how to integrate faith and sport, and now looking at competition even more from the athlete's perspective, as well as what does God say about it in the Bible, and how can you integrate the two together. So what do you think, Chris? Competition and the Christian, is it mutually exclusive? As a Christian, can you be a competitive athlete?
I think you certainly can, but there's a saying that I like, that the heart of the matter is actually a matter of the heart.
Huh.
So in your competition as a Christian, it kind of matters where your heart is at. Why are you competing? Are you competing because you want to be rich and famous, because you want to make other people look bad, or because ultimately you think that everything you do in your life can be glorifying to God?
So really it comes down to your motivation.
I think so, yeah.
And how did you deal with this as a player? I mean, when did you make a switch, or how did you come to, or did you find it easy to make, maybe not a switch, but how to bring your faith into how you play and interact on the basketball court?
Yeah, I guess it was something that because of the local church sports ministry that I was in when I was younger, they kind of ingrained that into us, that you can live out your Christian values through your sports and through competition. And one of the ways is, the easiest way to demonstrate that is actually through losses and how you handle those things.
Okay.
And I guess
did you lose a lot?
We didn't actually lose that much, but when we did, it always hurts.
Sure.
Because at the end of every season, only one team is going to be the champion.
Right.
So most of the others are not. And, so you're probably going to be in one of those situations at some point in your life, unless you are just an incredibly gifted athlete who never loses.
Yeah. Well, so how do you define winning and losing from your perspective? Because I think one of the things we want to do is we want to give you a biblical perspective on winning and losing, and I think maybe that's a little bit different than what the world says.
Yeah, and I guess I always tried to think of it not as did we win or lose the game, but one, did I give 100%?
Okay.
That was one of the first most important things to me, is did I actually play my hardest?
Right.
Because if I didn't, then to some degree, maybe I potentially let God down. Because, we're supposed to give everything to Him.
Yeah, and He's the one that's given you that talent and ability. And so when you're not using it to the best of your ability, then you're not glorifying Him as much as you could.
Right. And another, I guess, way that I try to look at winning and losing is oftentimes officials made calls that maybe I didn't agree with, and how I reacted to those things, or how I reacted to another player trying to be an antagonist and maybe saying mean things to me, trying to get in my head and stuff.
Okay.
Do I yell at the official when they call me for a foul and I think I didn't touch the guy, or do I say, you know what, okay?
Right. And I think what you're touching on is really the biblical perspective of competition, first of all, because we see in the verses on your screen in Genesis 1:28 and then later on in chapter 3, verse 17 and verse 19, Jesus eventually brings us into the competition because He ultimately defeats Satan. But we see in the garden that the command for Adam and Eve was to be fruitful and multiply and to rule the earth and subdue it. That in itself is competition. And then in Ephesians chapter 6, we see again that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against powers, against authorities, against rulers in this world. Yeah. And so as believers or as Christians or even just as people, we've got to learn to survive. Yeah. We've got to learn to compete because Satan is there. He wants to destroy us. And as Greg has been sharing with us, this is all a result of the fall of man. That because of sin, we've messed up this perfect world that God intended for us, which we think included competition. But because of now Satan coming into the picture and wanting to destroy us, then he has corrupted it in such a way that keeps us down. And so then we read that in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, that the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, wanting to destroy us. But then in Philippians 3, we've got a proclamation from Paul where he says, okay, guys, come on, press on, keep pressing on for the sake of the gospel in order to become all that God wants us to be. And so how do you reconcile that again with your faith? Because when the referee comes at you and makes a bad call, when a player tries to maybe intentionally even injure you, we have a biblical perspective of competition that is a part of a fallen world. But how do you deal with that?
It's not easy. I'll say that. But I guess it's just part of it is just having that perspective of knowing that all the gifts and abilities that you have are not yours. So even if they're taken away tomorrow, they were a gift initially. So they should be appreciated while you have them. And I actually really like that 1 Peter 5:8 verse, because one of my favorite verses is 1 Peter 5:7. And I think that's something you can see clearly demonstrated in sports today, specifically in the United States, where a few years ago, through competition, a fight broke out in an NBA game, and players ran into the stands and started beating up fans. So competition, I think, is something that definitely Satan tries to use against us.
And how did competition in itself is not bad? Right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you use competition in the right way, what does it do for you? How is it something good?
Ultimately, it's an iron sharpens iron thing. Because in my example, I was given gifts and abilities to play basketball, so I can compete against other basketball players to make us both the best basketball players we can be. And I guess it's something that's where it's the heart of the matter. I want them to be the best player they can be, and hopefully they want me to be the best player I can be.
Although they want to beat you.
Right.
But yeah, it's like when you play against a team that's better than you, often they bring out the best. So that you play better. And I think ultimately though, of course we wouldn't be advocating that you change your definition entirely of winning and losing, because living in this world, the winning and losing is often defined by the scoreboard.
Yeah.
But I think what's important is that you also have to look at a biblical perspective on winning and losing. And if we understand, as you've already said, what Paul writes in Colossians 3, verse 17 and 3:23, he says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for men. And then he goes on even to say, and do it as if Christ himself were doing it.
Yeah.
And so that should be our goal and our desire and our motivation should be in having worked for Athletes in Action. The word was, or the statement was, for the audience of one. That we realize that we're playing for God.
Yeah.
And ultimately we want to do our best for him because he's watching.
Yeah.
And that should compel us to do more.
Right.
And then in 1 Corinthians 9, 24 and 25, hopefully you've memorized these verses like we've talked about. But there you have Paul saying to pursue the crown that will last forever.
Yeah.
So ultimately what our goal is of course we want to win the championship, because that's how you define doing your best on one hand. But on the other hand, it's pursuing the crown that will last forever, which the three things that I believe last forever are God, his word, and the souls of men. And Paul is saying again that we have freedom for the sake of the gospel, the freedom to use sports, as long as we are pursuing those things.
Yeah.
And so that means using competition in the right way. That means realizing that sometimes I will play a team that's better than I am, and they will beat me.
Yeah.
But if I've done my best, and I've given everything I have, then that's all that I can do, and then God is pleased with that.
Right.
And so I think that changes our perspective a little bit, but you have to really transform your thinking, don't you? How did that affect you? Because you already said this was a realization you came to. So how did you feel, or how did you deal with that when you actually do play against a team that's better, you've done your best, and yet you still lose on the scoreboard, and yet from the biblical perspective and from God's perspective, he would say, hey Chris, I'm happy with you, you're a winner.
Yeah. I think that was something that was emphasized in high school, because there were times that we tried to play up, I guess, levels. So we're playing teams that are definitely better than us, and sometimes you lost by a lot. So it was unfortunate, but I guess it was just something that kind of clicked through spending time with God, and through, I guess, learning more about Jesus. If that makes sense. And as God transformed me on the inside, those things kind of came out. And I remember my senior year, we lost the district championship game. I actually fouled out with like 5 minutes left, which was really frustrating. And one of the things I thought is, we're probably going to lose this game, but I can be an example for the rest of my teammates of how we should lose this game.
That's good, yeah. And I think it starts with your coach too.
Yeah.
Because your coach has to have this realization as well. I remember when I was playing Little League baseball, and the coach would reward us if we won with a trip to buy ice cream. And when we lost, we just went home.
Yeah.
And so what does that emphasize? It emphasizes that the scoreboard is most important. Yeah. So coaches, you have to grasp this as well and realize that it's a transformation in your thinking. Not that winning on the scoreboard is not important, but your perspective is changed because of the biblical example, which Paul makes clear to us, that says, we're to do it as unto the Lord, as if he is the audience of one. He is the only one that's watching, and when I've done my best and given my best, then he's pleased. And so the coach should be pleased as well.
And I think that from a coaching perspective, that's something that you need to understand, specifically when you're coaching younger kids, that you're ingraining values in them that are going to last their entire life. And that's going to be how they go to work every day and how they treat their friends and potentially their kids and stuff.
So it's something you think about even now as a tax attorney.
Yeah.
A tax
accountant.
Right. And so then the last verse on here is Luke chapter 9, verses 24 and 25, where we read that ultimate losing is not knowing Christ and giving up your soul or giving up your life for the things of the world. Deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me, Jesus says in verse 23. But to gain the world and lose your soul, that's ultimate losing. So if you're creating an image of winning that is as the world thinks of it, or even if you're not, but you have not accepted Jesus and you're not committing your life to Him, as you said, how did you accept this? Was by spending more time with Jesus and understanding His perspective.
Yeah, and there are two verses that came up a lot in high school. One was James 1, take it as pure joy, my brothers, in all your trials.
Put it in the joy pot, we used to say.
Yeah, I remember one of our coaches quoting that verse as he would make us run line drills.
Did that make it easier for you?
I did not, but I think that's something that you can think about. Is taking those things as joys, and then also Hebrews 12:11, that no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. But those who are trained by it reap a harvest of righteousness.
Wow!
So even in those losses, they could actually make you a better person or a better player than the wins.
That's good. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so just wrapping up as we finish up this session, a few things to think about. You can get a great perspective on a biblical competitor as you read and study 1 Corinthians 9, verses 24 to 27. And actually, Paul brings in the analogy of a runner, but later in verse 27, or in that part of the passage, he brings in the image of a boxer. And he says, as a boxer competes and doesn't just shadow box, but he actually gets in the ring and competes. Then he does it in a way that he won't be disqualified. And so if you look at those verses, this is a great thing to do with your players or with your coaches, and take them through this passage and have them think, what is Paul saying, or what is God saying about a biblical competitor, and then how can I apply these things, first of all, in my coaching, and then as an athlete, if you take your athletes through it, what does it mean for me as an athlete? So you can really gain some things there. And then how have your definitions of winning, losing, and competition changed as a result of understanding the biblical perspective that we've talked about? So think through and talk about that with your players and with your coaches. And then how can you better represent Jesus when you play sports as a leader in your sports ministry? And so I really enjoyed this discussion, Chris. Thanks for sharing your own experience, and I just want to encourage you guys who are watching to discuss this among your players, among each other as athletes, among coaches, and try to really hold each other accountable.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys inviting me into the series today, and I think that. I guess that change in perspective was crucial in my life and has kind of flowed through in almost everything that I do.
Wow, that really emphasizes a lot how important this is to your ministry and as you're building into the lives of other people. So thanks, Chris, for your perspective, and I guess that wraps up this session. It's great that you're with us. The next session we're going to be starting a new topic. And it's going to be on the practical aspects of organizing sports ministry. So we hope you will join us, and we really look forward to you continuing along on this journey with us. So thanks for being here.
All right, we'll see you next time.
All right.